Hello everybody, this is Major Green and this is a review of the 5th episode of Star Trek Discovery. Overall I did not like this episode, however I'm still holding fingers, I'm still hoping for some cleverness to come out of the show. First of all, about the Spore Drive, just briefly I want to say that I found it kind of ridiculous. However, it does open up some interesting options, so I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that if they use it right, it might actually be interesting. Some people I saw were complaining about the saucer spinning. I actually don't have a problem with that, I even kind of like it. My biggest issue with the Spore Drive is that it violates established continuity. It doesn't make sense how come a century later no one else ever discovered these spores, no one else developed the same kind of technology. Maybe it can be argued that that's what the Iconians used. However, it still doesn't make sense how come no one in Starfleet or any of the races that we knew, no one ever found out about these spores and no one ever used this technology again. It doesn't really make sense unless they explain it well in this show. And I think there is actually an easy way to solve this problem. All they need to do is establish later on in the show, they need to establish that using this Spore Drive actually damages the space-time continuum. Maybe it has the potential to create subspace tears that can destroy whole solar systems, and that would actually fit very well with something that was once mentioned in Deep Space Nine. It was mentioned that in the mid-23rd century, which is exactly the time setting of the show, there was a special tear in some system, no one knew exactly what caused it, and that it ended up destroying the whole system. So the time frame fits perfectly with the show, so all they need to do really is to say that this drive actually caused that tear which destroyed the whole solar system, and that would explain why this technology was later banned and why no one ever used it again, because it's simply so dangerous. And they can say that they even made it illegal for anyone to experiment with this kind of technology, and it can even be classified as a subspace weapon, which in Star Trek Insurrection it was mentioned that subspace weapons were banned in the Kitom Records, and apparently it was banned for everybody. And so if this Spore Drive is actually revealed to be this dangerous, it will get classified as a subspace weapon and will be made illegal by Starfleet and probably all other powers, and this way it will fix this continuity problem. So hopefully they'll do that. And now I want to move to the actual episode. So they still have this creature that they use as a navigator to use the Spore Drive. This is kind of like the Navigator in Dune. They have to use the creature to navigate. The idea itself is cool, but the way they show this creature, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, in the episode in which they introduced it, they showed how powerful it is, that it is able to claw through walls, through the walls of a starship, and yet now they put it in this tiny glass container. Well, maybe it's not glass, but it's something transparent, so I assume it's a weaker material than the normal walls, and they use this little device, which some people make fun of it, saying it's like a nipple torture or something. They use this device to connect to the creature to use the Spore Drive, and they say that it hurts the creature, that the creature is suffering. It makes all those puppy noises, and so it's suffering as a result. Well, if that's the case, how come it doesn't try to rip up this device or try to escape this container? Like, it doesn't even try. Like, they showed it to be so powerful before that it was able to rip through anything, and yet it isn't able to do any damage to this small little device. Also, I hated the fact that in this episode they now say that the creature is sentient. In my previous review of the previous episode, I said how happy I am that they didn't try to say that it's sentient, because I think a good message is to be compassionate toward any animal that is suffering, not just if it's intelligent. Again, it doesn't fit with what we've seen of this creature. We never saw any indication of it being intelligent or sentient. It behaved totally like a wild animal since we saw it. Did the creature ever try to communicate with anyone? Did it tap prime numbers on the wall or something? No, it didn't. So it's totally ridiculous to now claim that it is, based on some scan or something. It doesn't make sense. It was just inconsistent with what we've seen. And the same with why the creature doesn't try to rip the device apart. How come the creature is now suddenly so peaceful when it was behaving like a total monster when we first saw it, ripping everything apart? Now they're saying it's intelligent. There was a scene in which Captain Lorca meets some admirals in a starbase, and I actually liked this scene because it addressed something that I was actually wondering about, which is if the Discovery ship basically has the prototype for this kind of drive, which is totally revolutionary, which can be used to easily win the war, how come Starfleet even puts this ship at risk? Why is it on the front lines? Why is it encountering Klingons all the time? It doesn't make sense. If it has this kind of prototype technology, then it should be put into the middle of Federation space to be the most protected, or even on the other side of the Federation. as far away from the Klingons as possible, simply to complete its research. That should be the top priority. So why is it always on the front lines, and why is it jumping into Klingon space all the time? So that's something that I was actually wondering about. I was actually about to complain about that, but they actually addressed it in this episode, and the female admiral actually told Lorca not to jump into Klingon space anymore. Captain Lorca seems to be more eager to fight the Klingons simultaneously. That's kind of stupid actually, because not only are you risking to lose this technology, you also risk giving it to the Klingons. Because if the Klingons capture the ship and they get all this technology, this will be like total disaster. But I guess it fits the character of Lorca, who kind of likes taking risks, I guess. Also, something I wanted to say about his eyes. He stated in a previous episode that he allows his eyes to heal naturally because he doesn't want it to be replaced by artificial eyes. And in this episode, this female admiral tells him like casually, why don't you get your eyes fixed? The way she says it, it's like it's no big deal, like it's very easy to fix. I guess she means to replace his eyes with artificial eyes. And because she says it so casually, I guess those replacement eyes would look like normal eyes, so it's not a big deal. But that doesn't really fit with continuity either, because do you remember Geordi LaForge? Do you remember the fact that he had to wear like that ugly visor? It wasn't by choice at first. Later on maybe it was by choice, but in the beginning he simply had no choice. That was the best possible technology. And yet here, judging by the way that the admiral said that like it's so easy to replace the eyes, why don't you do it? That doesn't seem to fit the continuity with the other shows. Another continuity problem is that it's stated directly that everybody knows about Michael. They know that she's the first mutineer in Starfleet. It seems like the whole Federation knows about it. This admiral says that it damages the morale of the fleet because she's not in prison. So obviously everybody knows about her, right? So how come in the original series, when Chekhov asked if there was ever a mutiny on a Starfleet ship, Spock said there was never any mutiny on any Starfleet ship ever? How does that fit with this show? And especially since everybody is supposed to know about it, also Spock is kind of a know-it-all, and also because she's supposed to be now Spock's foster sister. So there's no way that Spock didn't know about it. I guess the only way to explain it is that maybe Michael will get pardoned, and so her record will be cleared from the mutiny, and Spock's direct quote was, there was never a recorded incident. So maybe her record simply gets cleaned. Also, in general, it makes the galaxy seem so much smaller when everybody are connected to each other. Like, there's so few people in the galaxy, and that's a big problem in this episode later on, that there seems to be so few people in the galaxy. Why make her adoptive Vulcan father be Sarek? Why not make it a totally different Vulcan? I guess the only reason is that they thought that would satisfy some fans if they drop some familiar names, some familiar characters, but I think that's doing the opposite. That's only pissing off the fans with these inconsistencies. First of all, you change all the actors, and the actors don't even look alike, and the same with Mad in this episode. For those of you who don't know, Mad was a recurring villain in the original series, so I think that only damages the continuity, and it only makes the whole galaxy feel smaller because you keep running into the same exact people. Like all the crews we know, all the shows we know, keep running into exactly the same people. The galaxy is so big, and yet Mad is always in the picture. And even when they show the Klingon ship which captured the Lorca, they say directly that it's a D7. D7 looks like this. So why do that? Why use the same exact classification of a Klingon ship? I guess they did it because they thought the fans would appreciate that Easter egg, that it's the same name as the Klingon ships in the original series. It's a D7 battle cruiser, but I think it's doing the opposite because it doesn't look like this. If they didn't do that, we could just assume that the D7 warships are out there somewhere, we just don't see them, and so that preserves continuity. And yet they're doing the opposite. They deliberately show a ship which doesn't look like that, and they say that it's a D7. They think they are making the fans happy, but I think it's causing the opposite. It only serves to rub salt in the wound. It's only pushing it even more that this is a reimagining, that it's a reboot basically. It cannot be set in the same continuity. So why do that? Why not leave that little bit of leeway, that room for the fans to speculate that maybe this is somehow all in the same universe, all in the same timeline, the same continuity. Like the fans would figure out the excuses to explain all these other inconsistencies, and yet you're pushing it in their face that no, this is a D7, this is a Klingon, this is Mad, this is Sarek, who now can use telepathy over thousands of light years, and everybody are using holograms now, and why do that? Why not leave that little bit of room for the old fans to imagine that it is all in the same continuity? They're doing everything the other way around. So anyway, as for the Klingons, the heavy makeup, as I said before, is a big problem because you can't even recognize all the Klingons. So when I saw this Klingon woman, I was wondering if she's the same one who appeared in the previous one. I wasn't sure because we can't actually recognize anyone in this makeup, and so I wasn't sure if it's the same Klingon woman or a different one. Another problem with the Klingons is how they dress. All these outfits with spikes, they don't look very practical. The Klingons can barely move in these outfits, and in the first 2 episodes that could be excused by saying that maybe that was just their ceremonial armor, that they don't usually dress like this to go into battle, and yet in this episode we saw Klingons in the exact same outfits attacking the shuttle, capturing Lorca, which by the way I think was captured very stupidly. Like, if he's such an important individual that he basically has the secrets to the most advanced prototype weapons of the Federation, how come he didn't have any proper escort? I mean, he just met some admirals in a starbase and now goes back to his ship and using a tiny shuttle, and the Klingons somehow so easily captured his shuttle. And as we see that they can barely even move in this outfit, so that's kind of strange. By the way, I did like the Klingon spacesuits. In the previous episode we saw a Klingon standing on the bridge of an abandoned Starfleet ship, and everything was kind of frozen. That did look kind of cool, and I think it has some elements of H.R. Giger, the Xenomorph. It's similar to the Prometheus engineers. It's also similar to the Predator helmet. And the way it opens up is kind of like in Stargate, you know, it just kind of rolls back into the outfit. So I think they kind of took like all those cool elements of other science fiction. I think I read somewhere that the designer of the Klingons in the show was actually, he said himself that he is a fan of H.R. Giger, and so I guess he admits that he took some inspiration from H.R. Giger, so that's why the Klingons look so much like xenomorphs. Maybe that explains their elongated heads and the little dimples in their skin and stuff like that, which does sometimes look cool. Like, some of the Klingons did actually look cool. If they were a completely different species, I would actually like that. The problem is, I said, that you can barely even recognize some of these Klingons, so I guess that's why they're giving them all scars, to distinguish them. So one of them was an albino, another one had the scars under his eyes, so they're kind of doing that so that we will be able to recognize them later, I guess, because otherwise we will not be able to. So anyway, Lorca getting captured was kind of stupid. Also, Saru was really annoying in this episode as always. Like, I hear some people like him, I really can't get why. Like, he's a super annoying character. And he asks the computer to show him the most decorated captains in the fleet. And what a coincidence that all the ones we see on screen are all ones that we've seen previously or heard about in Star Trek previously. So the problem is that it makes the galaxy look so smaller. Like, no other captain was ever decorated. Like, only the captains that we happen to know about from the other shows. And the 2 of them happen to be the captains of the original Enterprise, and of course we know that later on Captain Kirk will also be known as a legendary captain. The Constitution Enterprise just happened to have been captained by 3 of the most famous captains in Starfleet history. One ship had all 3 such amazing captains. It doesn't really make sense. The galaxy is much bigger. I mean, they have thousands of ships, right? So how come the most decorated captains just happen to have been on the Enterprise at the time? And also Captain Archer, of course. Captain Archer from the prequel Enterprise, also the best captain. Also, it's kind of funny because I think Captain Archer was one of the most incompetent captains. He was constantly beaten up by everybody else. So it's kind of hilarious to see that he's like the most amazing captain. Captain Matthew Decker also appeared in the original series as a glorified captain. We also see the name of Philippa Georgia, who is the captain from the first 2 episodes of this show. So everybody on this list we know about. So what a coincidence. How small is this galaxy that we know all of these names? So this is kind of ridiculous, I think. Also, it's very interesting that Captain Garth isn't on this list. And remember, this takes place 9.5 years before Captain Kirk takes command of the Enterprise, so he should be out of the academy by now. Yet he said in the episode in which he met Garth, he said that he studied his adventures in the academy, so he should already be known as a very well documented, very accomplished captain. So why is he not on this list? And my personal theory and hope is that Captain Lorca will actually turn out to be him, because I want Lorca to be a villain. I want him to be revealed to be the villain of the show, and maybe it turns out that Garth is his second name or something, so they can make something up, and that he will actually become insane. He will be put, in the end of the show, he will be put into an asylum for the mentally insane. That would be kind of cool, I think, so I want it to happen. And so that would explain why he's not on this list. Maybe Captain Lorca should have been on this list. And that would explain how come people were already studying his adventures in the academy. So that's how Kirk knew him, and later on he will change his name. So that would be kind of cool. So it's kind of strange, why is he not on this list? Unless it is later revealed to be Lorca, so which would be kind of cool. And I made a whole video about this theory that Captain Lorca will be revealed to be Garth, so you can check out the other video if you want. I also made a whole video about my theory that maybe Lorca is the one who actually engineered the whole conflict with the Klingons deliberately. If you remember, the whole thing started because of a damaged relay that Starfleet came to investigate, and that's why they found that ancient Klingon artifact, which was a holy site for the Klingons, and that led to the whole conflict. So we never got an answer of who exactly sabotaged that original relay. So my theory is that maybe it is actually Captain Lorca, and maybe that's why he has the eye damage, because of the light from the artifact from the first episode. So that would actually be kind of an interesting twist. And we did get an additional clue in this episode when it's revealed that he basically killed his former crew, that he destroyed his older ship. He said it was in the first month of the war with the Klingons, that he was the only survivor from his own ship, that everybody perished because he killed them. He says he did it to prevent them from being taken captive by the Klingons, because they would get tortured, and so he basically spared them, so he killed everybody, and yet he escaped himself. So do you really think a captain would sacrifice his crew like this without even staying with them, escaping himself and only killing his crew? I don't think it makes sense. I think it makes a lot more sense if he killed them deliberately, simply because they found out the truth about him, that he is actually the one who started the war with the Klingons. Maybe he took a shuttle from that ship to start the war, and then when he came back and they saw his damaged eyes, maybe they put two and two together and they realized that he's actually the one who started the war. And when he realized that they know his secret, he deliberately killed them, and he destroyed that ship to erase all the evidence, basically. So it's possible this is another hint that he is actually a villain, not just a shady character. And speaking of villains, we see Harry Mudd in this episode. He was a villain in the original series. And again, this makes the galaxy seem so much smaller, because everybody knows everyone. It's kind of silly. And another problem is that in the original series, he was kind of a comic relief villain. He was not a true villain. He was not. He was there to be funny, basically. He was in comedic episodes. And yet, in this episode, it's like a straight-up villain. There's nothing funny about him. There was no funny moment. So why even make him the same character? So again, it's kind of frustrating. I don't get what they're doing, where they're going with it. And it's not even an origin story. So what's the point even? Like, if Lorca is revealed to be Garth, that would actually be kind of interesting, because that would be the origin story of Garth of Izar. We get to see how he gone crazy, how he became a villain. So that would actually be kind of interesting. And yet here with Harry Mudd, he's basically exactly the same guy as we know. So what's the point of having him here even? Now, the stupidest thing in this episode is how easily they escaped the Klingons. Like, aren't the Klingons supposed to be much more stronger than humans? Like, we've seen Worf raise someone up with one hand. And yet in this episode, they kind of beating up the Klingons so easily, it's kind of ridiculous. And the way they escaped the ship so easily, without any problem, it was kind of silly. However, some fans theorize a very interesting theory, which, if it turns out to be true, it will actually justify the silliness of it. Because if the theory is true, then the Klingons actually allow them to escape deliberately. And then it would make sense how it was so easy. And the theory is that this guy that Captain Lorca rescues, that he is actually that albino Klingon from the previous episodes, the Klingon Walk, that he actually had himself surgically changed to look like a human in order to be a spy, to infiltrate into the Discovery and to steal the most important technology. The last time we saw him, he was with the same Klingon woman, and it's even stated in this episode, he tells Captain Lorca that he basically slept with the Klingon woman, which, by the way, was completely ridiculous also when I heard it. I mean, what? I mean, I could buy it with the old Klingons, the ones who looked more like humans, that would be believable. But these Klingons look like xenomorphs, so it makes absolutely no sense that a human would make love to such an ugly Klingon, so I don't buy it for a second. But if it turns out to be Vok, then in a way he was kind of telling the truth, because it seemed like there was some kind of a love thing between them, so maybe they were actually a couple, so he wasn't actually lying. But it was just out of the blue, it was so silly, it almost made me laugh, because the Klingons look so ugly. Like, how would he even be able to get it up being with her? Like, it doesn't make sense. Maybe Riker would be able to do that, but not this guy who looks kind of puny. So it's possible that this whole event was staged in order to get him as a spy on the Discovery. And I think the biggest clue that it's him is the scar we see below his eye. In the second episode, Michael actually gave a very similar injury to Vok. he got the exact same injury in the exact same place under the same eye. So maybe this is a clue that it is indeed him. However, it is kind of silly, like if he underwent such extreme surgery to change his look and yet they couldn't fix that little scar. So that's kind of ridiculous, but I think I will like it if they actually do this twist, and it will, as I said, it will explain the problem in this episode of how easily they escape the Klingons. It would be kind of like in Star Wars Episode 4, in which they escape the Death Star so easily. A small group of people manages to escape the most heavily fortified station. That would have been kind of ridiculous, but they actually had a very good reason for it in the movie, when they said that Vader deliberately allowed them to escape because he put a homing signal on their ship to find the rebel base. So that made sense in the movie. So maybe they're planning to do something similar here. So that would actually justify the scene of them escaping so easily. The only problem I think is that the guy attacked that Klingon woman when Lorca wasn't even looking. And also she almost got killed by him, so it doesn't really make sense. Would he really do that just to make it more convincing? So that's kind of strange. So I'm kind of hoping that this theory is true, but I kind of doubt it because I don't think the writers are this clever. But maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they will have all these twists. I hope it will be revealed what I speculated about Lorca. Maybe he will turn to be Garth. Now back to the Discovery. There was another dumb moment with the Spore creature. They said that only creatures with advanced nervous system would be able to interact with the spores, and they said that humans would be able to. So that's glorifying humans. They say that humans are an evolved creature and that other animals would not be able to do that. So I kind of call bullshit on that. Humans, biologically speaking, are not more advanced than other animals that exist today. And also they said they tried to find a creature in the whole galaxy from the database that would be able to interact with the spores, and they couldn't find any. And yet humans are compatible. So from all the species, humans are the most compatible. And about the F word, many people complained about that they said the F word on the show. And I also have a problem with that, mainly because of the continuity problem. This show takes place right before the Kirk era. And do you remember the movie in which Captain Kirk went back to the present, to our time? How surprised he was by people cursing, how he didn't know how to curse, he didn't know how to reply to people cursing at him. So it's as if it was his first time in his life in which he ever cursed. Like he never heard anybody curse before. That's the impression that we got from this movie. Because the humans of the future are so enlightened. And yet here in this show, for no reason, suddenly they start using the F word for absolutely no reason. So it really felt forced. It felt unfitting because it doesn't fit with the continuity. Not because I mind cursing. I love cursing. I personally have no problem hearing curses all the time. I think it's funny. I have no problem with that. In my old parodies of Star Trek, I used to make them curse all the time. So I have no problem with the cursing itself. I do have a problem with them ruining the continuity. And nothing in this show fits. Nothing in this show feels like in the original Star Trek. And you know, all these background characters on the bridge, I talked about it in my previous video. I said that they don't really look right for Starfleet. We never saw stuff like that in any of the other shows. When did we ever see a woman with a computer helmet, or with a robot face, or with implants in the head, or these strange punk haircuts, or tattoos? All this stuff is kind of, I guess they're doing that to look cool. They're trying to make Star Trek cool, so they're bringing in all these weird looking guys on the bridge who we never get to meet, we never get to know anything about them except their look. So they're just there for the view, they're just there to make it look cool. And do you remember in TNG when Riker met Ensign Ro? Do you remember he told her that her earring violates Starfleet dress policy? He made her take her earring off because it didn't fit with Starfleet. And yet here you have all these guys with strange haircuts and tattoos and weird implants in their heads. I guess we did have the character with tattoos in Voyager, also in the episode in which they traveled back to the 1990s and they saw all those punks and stuff. They kind of looked at each other and they kind of like, what's wrong with these people? So it seems like that was not the fashion in Starfleet. In this show, everybody on the bridge look kind of weird. Like everybody have strange haircuts or tattoos or implants. So it doesn't really fit in the continuity, I think. And the same with the designs of the ships. The Klingon D7, which looks nothing like the D7 from the original series. And by the way, about the Klingon spacesuits, I don't actually have a problem with that because I do think that looked cool. And also we never got to see Klingons wearing spacesuits in any of the other shows. So maybe they always had those cool suits and we just never saw them. So that doesn't violate continuity. So that is one design in this show that I do like, even though it was kind of a rip-off from various other stuff. But still it looks cool and it doesn't directly violate anything, so I was fine with that. However, the D7 battle cruiser That just rubs the salt on the wounds of all the old Trekkies. Why do that? Why not call it something else? Which would allow some wiggle room for the old fans to figure something out to explain how it can all be in the same universe. Also, there's an interesting theory. Some people speculate that maybe this whole show is actually set in the mirror universe. In short, I can say that I don't think that will be the case, and it wouldn't make sense to be the case, because the Federation is not called the Federation, it's called the Terran Empire. It's not USS, it's ISS, and all the symbols of the Empire, the salute of the Empire, and the Empire already exists. We saw that in Enterprise, in Archer's time, so I don't think it would make sense for the show to be set there. I think that also that would have been a brilliant idea if it was set up right. All they had to do is never mention the name Federation. They could still use the name Starfleet, because in the mirror universe they also had a Starfleet, but not the Federation. So if they did that cleverly, maybe they could have pulled off this twist, and it would have been cool, and it would have actually avoided a whole bunch of continuity problems. It would have been brilliant. It would explain the dark tone of the series, why everybody are so evil, all of that. It would have been fit perfectly. The Klingons would still be a problem, because we've seen Klingons in the mirror universe in DS9, and they look like TNG era Klingons. We never saw in the original series how the Klingons looked in the mirror universe, so it can be argued that maybe they never got infected by that virus in the mirror universe, so they never look like humans, but they should still look like the TNG Klingons. So if they had TNG looking Klingons on this show, that would have been a perfect explanation. If it turned out to be in the mirror universe, you could say that the Klingons in that universe never got infected by the virus, and that's why they all look like that. That would have been perfect. And then you could have your darker Star Trek with much more evil kind of plots. You could later reveal that it's not actually a Federation, it's actually an Empire. So that would like fit that dystopian feeling of this whole show. And I guess they can still do it. I guess it can be done. Maybe they can say that the Empire temporarily changed its name to the Federation, maybe for better PR. Maybe Empress Hoshi changed the name to the Federation. Remember, she actually read those files from the future, from the normal Federation, so maybe she's doing deliberate changes for better PR, so maybe that can be used to explain it, and maybe they suddenly change it back to all the Empire symbols. So I kind of like this theory, but I don't buy it. I don't think that will turn out to be the case. Like, if young Spock appears on this show and he has a goatee beard, that would be like so mind-blowingly awesome to be suddenly revealed to be in the mirror universe. I think all the old fans would have loved it. It will also explain how come Spock never mentioned his foster sister, because maybe his father never adopted her in his universe. And also you could do a story with Michael actually teleporting to the normal universe, and then everything will be much brighter there in the style of the original series. And if they did that maybe in the very end of the show, like so many things in this show will be forgiven if they actually did that. And by the way, in the very end of this episode, we might have got a hint of the mirror universe. We saw this guy looking in the mirror, and then he walks away, and yet his reflection stays around for a few seconds longer with the creepy music. So maybe that will somehow tie to the mirror universe. I hope they're not using an actual mirror to actually go over to the mirror universe. That would be kind of silly. So I kind of did like this ending. I thought it was kind of creepy in a cool way, and also intriguing. It makes you wonder what's about to happen next. Why does his reflection have a mind of its own? That was kind of strange. And with the Spore Drive, which is basically like a improbability drive, I guess anything is possible. And this is a topic I will talk about in a separate video about the Spore Drive. So please subscribe to my channel. Please like the video if you liked it. Please let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below, and we can talk about it in the comments. So that's it for now, and I will see you next time.